Umang, I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
My name is Mayank.
Okay, I think if I start calling you Mayank in this conversation, I'm going to lose my chain of thought. So let's stick to Umang. And why I've been looking forward to this is because in the last 7 years that I've known you as an entrepreneur, startup guy, a design enthusiast, marketing expert. If there's anything that I ever want to bounce off about digital, about UX, about marketing, you've kind of become my go-to guy for these things. And, starting our association at the co-working space that you were managing back in 2016 to now inviting you into our office, it's been a full circle. Today's conversation, I wanted to keep it really broad because I wanted to be a pretty free flow with this.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been an experience designer for 20 years. I've realized after meeting you that experience design is a much broader term than what most people think, right? Experience design is actually not about digital. It's much more than that. So I want to kick off things by asking you to comment on that. What do you think about the era of experience economy, so to speak? And where does your latest project fit into all of this?
Basically, where we are as a society right now, I'll start with that. We've never been more comfortable, right? I talk to entrepreneurs all the time and want to be entrepreneurs.
What do you mean by comfortable?
Basically, we have all our needs met. We're not in the Middle Ages where there's too cold outside, suddenly it's warm inside, We have the best equipment available to us, travel is a pleasure, etc. But having said that, we're still consuming in a big way. People come and tell me, hey, Umang, I want to start a new company, but I don't have an idea. This idea is taken, that idea is taken. You're right, most ideas are taken. Where you sort of differentiate and where you add value is in the small things. And that is where the experience economy comes in. Those are the key differentiators, I believe. For example, you're a UX designer. Most websites basically look and feel the same. If you're talking about an e-commerce website, Amazon has set a template and most people try and follow that. But what makes the act of shopping a pleasure would be those details and the experience part of it that makes it more interesting. I think that is what I look at when I talk about experience design. With co-working specifically, an office is an office. But having said that, what I try and do a little bit differently is when you walk into office, can I make your sort of walk into office a little bit more fun? Can sort of your coffee experience be a little bit more fun? So those details, I think, is what really defines a good experience versus an average experience.
So I want to get into a little bit more detail on that, but before I do, let's just step back for a bit. And for those of you who are watching this, who may not know the full history of Umang, I know that you did work in a corporate job.
I did, yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about your evolution.
Yeah, so I was an investment banker.
The last thing I associate with Umang is investment
Yeah, me too.
banking.
It was a different life. I was working in Switzerland in private equity, moved to India and was doing investment banking for a large corporate.
Why move back to India?
The reason I moved back to India was I think there's more opportunity here to make real change, in the sense that when you live in Switzerland, etc., obviously it's a great lifestyle, but having said that, there's not much happening. Everything that's built there in terms of infrastructure, in terms of ideas, everything is in place. In India, there's a long way for us to go to get to that level. There's a lot more opportunity, which is why I moved back.
That's interesting. So you're saying you moved back because you wanted to be part of that change.
Absolutely.
That is happening right now.
It feels like a Swadesh moment, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. The idea is that, I'll give you an example. We were doing large deals in private equity where we were buying and selling companies. We would do one deal a year. You're working a whole year and you're doing one deal, and that was very normal for them. Because there's not much to do and the deal size was massive. So you just have to do one deal a year for them to make the money that they need to. Versus when I came to India working for this MNC, we were doing 16 deals a month. Micro deals, but there was a lot more action. There's a lot more for me to do. And in terms of learning as well, you learn a lot more when you're doing a multitude of things. So that is why which was the right call, I think, to move back to India, because there's a lot more opportunity, a bigger sort of index that you can do in terms of making a change.
So high on action.
Right.
High on opportunity.
Right.
You wanted to be part of that growth spurt.
Right.
So investment banking happened then?
Investment banking happened and I was deeply unhappy. I hated going to office. I come from the US where it's very normal for your boss and you to be friends. That was not happening. There was a strict hierarchy. They had cabins they were sitting in. Everyone was working like robots. And I thought this is not what life is about. You should enjoy
How
work.
old were you back then?
I was about 22, 23, and I was spending 8, 9, 10 hours of my life at work. And there was nothing done to make me stimulated, make friends, etc., etc. And that's where
It was
the
all
thought
about the
of
money.
it was all about the money, all about the work, all about productivity. But that's not what life is about. If you're spending 8, 9, 10 hours for the next 30 years of your life doing that,
How much money were you making? You don't have to answer.
not enough.
I'm sure you were making a lot of money as an investment banker.
I was doing well, but having said that, I was, like I said, and that's part of it, right? Where it's got me to today. I realized money doesn't matter. I mean, it's very easy for people to say that once they have the money, but having said that, I genuinely believe that once you do have all the money in the world, what do you look for? You look for experiences, and that sort of circles back to the experience economy and what we're trying
So
to
that
do.
experience wasn't satisfying for you?
Absolutely not, yeah.
Okay.
And I decided that I wanted to be the change. I was actually deeply inspired by Mr. Son, who was a SoftBank guy, and I read his memo. And obviously, he was in the news for all the wrong things recently. But having said that, his memo talks about, and I wanted to solve a large problem. And I believe the largest problem that you can solve right now is not going to be climate change. It's not going to be pollution, etc. It's going to be, for the next 20, 30 years, is loneliness. And that's what that memo spoke about.
Interesting.
I think the world is becoming more and more lonely as it's becoming more and more digital. And I noticed that when I was working for that MNC, we had people coming from all over India to get a job there. From a small town person coming to Bombay, it's very hard to make new friends. And most people would try and make friends at work. That would become their circle. I lived in Bombay, so I always had friends here. And I realized, hey, that's a big problem. I remember in Switzerland as well, when I was working, I couldn't make friends very easily. And my friends were people at work. And that's where the loneliness aspect happened, where I was like, the work doesn't facilitate friendship. They don't facilitate two people meeting. Sit in your cubicle, do your work and go home. That is the problem I wanted to solve. And that's where sort of...
So you said, I want to solve the loneliness pandemic, which is becoming increasingly
Right.
as big a killer as smoking or sugar. And that led you to doing
Co-working,
your
right.
own thing. And why co-working specifically?
Like I said, the problem I was trying to tackle was work and loneliness at work. Because I thought, hey, if I'm spending 8 to 10 hours of my day in a place and I'm going home tired usually, can I take that 8 to 10 hours and find a way to make people less lonely during that time? Can I stimulate them? Can I sort of expose them to the creative arts? Can I sort of make them better as human beings, not only as workers during that time? And that's where co-working happened, because I was like, hey, listen, I can't come and change the way a corporate operates, but can I change the environment in which they operate?
Interesting.
And co-working was just coming up back then.
It was right at the beginning
Right,
of that whole
absolutely.
co-working revolution.
Yeah, I think WeWork was a couple of years old maybe in the US, still a
Yeah.
small company. And I read about Son, I read about the WeWork investment, and I, also realized that I don't know anything about co-working, so I'm just going to do it my way. And that's how it started.
And you ran that for how long?
5 years, and we had to shut down during the pandemic.
I was one of your
Right.
customers.
Right.
I had a fantastic 2 years there, and ZEUX started there. And I think we wouldn't have been who we are today if we hadn't spent our foundational kind of 2 years there. And so the pandemic hit, you had to close doors.
Right.
What's been happening since then?
Since the pandemic, I shut down and I realized that I have all this expertise in sort of branding and running my space, doing marketing for it, working with startups. Can I continue to do that? I started consulting with a few startups who were my customers. That led me to sort of deeper roles with them, work with multiple D2C brands, got them from say 10 crores in revenue up to almost 50, 60 crores. I realized that I was good at marketing and I continue to do that. Recently, I decided that, hey, it's a good time, let me sort of bring Often back. Now that people know about co-working, people are educated about co-working, can I sort of take that other step up and do an even better space given what's already out there? Earlier I had no reference point, now I do.
So I get, Umang, that you came from a business background, right? You did investment banking.
Right.
So you have a business lens. You did your own co-working space, so you had a startup lens. What gave you the design lens? I've always wondered. You haven't studied design.
I haven't.
And I have had some amazing conversations on design. And I've always wondered, what gave you all of that kind of insider knowledge on design, as if you've been working in the design industry?
It's a few things actually. One, I would say, is my affinity for the arts. I love Andy Warhol. I love all the work that it goes into great architecture. And what I realized is when I would appreciate art, that they would have a very empathetic lens towards people. When they create something, they have a story to tell. And that story, how they translate it and how they sort of tell the audience, is what always fascinated me. So I'd love to read up behind how they do it. Or if you walk into a nice sort of restaurant, the kind of detail that it takes to understand that what makes it nice versus what makes it average, that is what would always fascinate me. And then I realized that all boiled down to design and the way you thought about design. And that's where I started getting interested in design. So that's why I would like to say I'm very self-taught. I read books, I had role models like Dieter Rams, and I realized that design as a field is, I wouldn't even call it a field, I think design is in everything.
Yeah.
And even as a business, when you run a business, I think some of the best run businesses are by designers. I'm a big fan of Airbnb. And in fact, when a designer runs a business, you realize that they have way more empathy for their customer, for their employees. All of that becomes part of, because they design an experience for everybody.
I agree with you, Umang. The flip side of it would be to ask the question, well, how many really successful companies were started by designers?
I mean, again, for that you have to define what really successful means to people. If you're
The one company I can think of is Airbnb.
Yeah. I would counter that with, have you seen a Tesla? I mean, you can't tell me that there's no design element involved
But
there.
Elon Musk was not a designer.
Steve Jobs was a designer, I would say. He was a calligrapher, right? That's what he studied. Elon Musk, you may not call him a designer. Like, I'm not a designer, but that doesn't mean we're not all designers. We have a design lens. That's what
So
makes us
you're
design.
saying people who come with a design bent of mind when they start businesses, there's more thoughtfulness,
There's more empathy.
Empathy
Yeah,
in every little thing that is put together.
right.
So when you started a co-working space as a way to combat this problem of loneliness and to change the way people work,
Right.
didn't you think that, well, co-working is becoming a thing, but digital is a bigger thing? Why not just start a digital business?
I personally think one of the reasons loneliness is becoming big is because everything going digital. When the first pandemic hit, which was back in the day in the Middle Ages, people were dying, I think it was a plague, I don't know, etc. And they shut down everything, right? And there was not enough government facilities, etc. to take care of people. But when the pandemic was over, all industries were sort of shut down. What was the first industry you think that must have come up?
Travel?
No. Travel was not a thing back then, they didn't have airplanes, so.
I had no idea.
Theatre. Because people looked for entertainment. They wanted to go out, meet people, and watch something. So if you see, during the pandemic, the number one industry was OTT.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized, that, hey, people are looking for meaningful interaction. And people are looking for meaningful physical interaction as well. That's why I never thought that work from home will become a thing, because at the end of the day, people will want to go out, step out, meet people, and be in an environment. Coffee shops were full again, etc., etc. And that's where I realized that while digital businesses are important and they exist, they should enable our everyday lives. And what is our everyday life? Our everyday life is very physical. And that's how I thought about it.
That's awesome. So as you navigating into building the second avatar, so to speak, of your co-working project, what lessons from the first time are you kind of putting into the second version? As a broader question, what's your playbook for exceptional experiences?
I think, it's always the details. This time there's going to be more detail. There are going to be nuances within the space. There are going to be more moments where people are going to be like, hey, this has been designed for me. And that personalization is what I'm going to be adding this time. Indigo Airlines, for example, the kind of personalization they add, every single so detail oriented. That's the sort of playbook here this time. My space first was an office space. This time, the way I've sort of thought about it is we're an art and culture space first, or we're also an office space.
Oh, first an art and culture space,
Yeah.
and second a workspace.
Yeah, because I think that's our key differentiator this time. What I believe is that, I don't care if you're a corporate working, a postman or an insurance salesman, at the end of the day, as human beings, we need to be exposed to culture, to art, to music, etc., to be the best versions of ourselves. And I want to bring that to people. And we're an event space, we're an art and culture space, and that enables people coming together and working every day. I would describe an often experience to sort of answer your first question would be, you walk in, start your day with a meditation session on our terrace, or you do a quick stretching with a professional instructor, You shower and you get to work. You work in silence all day. Every time you go get a coffee, you meet another entrepreneur, maybe gives you an insight on their business, or you sort of make a new connection. You get back to work. In the evening, we've programmed a talk by a famous, say, famous author. Or you're watching, we have a artist coming and doing an exhibition, or we're doing a play. So your whole day, you're doing something very different and you're getting new experiences the entire day. That's how a day in Often would look like.
Wow. Let's step back and talk a little bit about design as a broader theme. Where do you see digital going right now and experience design as a whole?
I think, that's a question that I would have for you as well. I personally believe we've come to a state where digital was going and sort of putting the human being first. I think now they're putting the business first, where I think it's becoming more and more dark. It's like, how do I get someone to make a transaction? How do I get someone to spend more time on my app instead of less time? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's cyclic. Those are phases that actually happen with every new powerful technology out there. There is a business focus, and after a while people see through that, and then the tide changes towards being more benevolent, and then the business focus comes back.
Are you as a designer responsible for that?
Of course, the designer is finally the architect of the experience. So the right answer would be to say 100% responsible, because the designer always has the choice to say no, even if the business is pushing a designer to craft something in a certain way, or to still find a novel way to meet business goals without having to delve into like dark design practices and so on. At the end of the day, I think design always has the choice on, do they want to take like the shortcut and just bite the bullet, or suffer through the harder route and find a
But what is
medium.
a good designer though then? Someone who will get me the most number of conversions, make me the most money, or someone who will make sure my customer is having a great time?
It's a great question. And when I studied design and innovation, I was taught the 3-circle validation technique, which basically said, in order to assess the validity of your design work, you basically pass it through 3 lenses. The first lens is the user lens. Is it useful for the user? Will they be able to solve a problem? Will their life be better? Will they get it? The second is the business lens. Is this monetizable? The third is the obvious technology lens. Can we actually build it? And for the longest time, I think for 40, 50 years, those 3 lenses are all that mattered. And over the last 5 years, I've realized that the 4th lens I was always missing was the lens of impact. At the end of the day, what impact are you leaving on the world with this design? I mean, every time somebody drinks a Coca-Cola or eats out of a packet of chips that Lay's makes, I think they forget the impact lens. And so I would say a good designer is somebody who passes their design work through all the 4 lenses and be able to, say to themselves, to their own conscience, that they were actually able to meet the criteria for success.
But is that like a very privileged way of looking at, some designers need a job and they need to make money first. How do you weigh things like that,
Yeah, no, so it's interesting. And I think the way you think about designing thoughtfully can be done in small and big ways. I'll give you a very small example. When you buy chewing gum in Japan, you've recently gone on a trip to Japan, the packaging also contains a set of paper that you will use to dispose of the chewing gum. No other chewing gum that I ever bought in India actually thinks about that obvious step. Yeah, I'll unwrap it, I'll eat it, but then what happens after?
What about that packaging cost or that paper cost you're adding to your,
Yeah. No, I guess you've got to really kind of do your thinking through all of that.
But that's my dilemma towards design, right? I talk to a designer, and I'm a business guy, like you pointed out, but I also have this, urge to design better, an exceptional experience. My thinking is, and I was sort of like just gauging how you would respond to something like that as a designer first, I would say. But I genuinely believe that the kind of design decisions that you take, that chewing gum you spoke about, etc., will net me way more money in the long run, because
Sure.
It's free marketing. People talk about it. What chewing gum brand will you talk about? You know, today you're going to talk about that one.
Correct.
And that's where sort of it snowballs. What people forget is that the
and also,
lens.
are people ready for a kind of chewing gum brand that cares about the disposal of it, right?
I think they are. That's the thing.
Exactly. And so, if you think of impact independent of where the world is today, then I think it's going to be a tough road to walk on. But today, the people that matter, the cohort that matters, cares about the impact of what they do and the companies they buy from.
Right.
I would say being thoughtful in design is not just good for the world, it's good for business.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
I think it is, and again, I keep coming back, exceptional company, Indigo, and I always tell this story, is when I asked for a cup of water, and they gave me a cup. They could have given me any cup, like it's a paper cup, right? But they had a riddle on it, and I interacted with that. And I thought that was so genius. It was such a great idea, because at the end of the day, I had a little moment, I told people about it, and also made me appreciate Indigo more.
So that's interesting. So how would you differentiate for somebody who doesn't really quite get the difference between experience versus just an activity or just an action, right? So you said drinking water out of a glass versus drinking water out of a glass that has a puzzle on it. You're saying one is an experience, the other is just an action.
Right.
What's the difference, essentially?
The difference is that, can I create a memorable moment for you in that second? Right? You can buy any toothbrush, but if you buy an interesting toothbrush or a pink toothbrush, you're making a choice. It's, look at Steve Jobs, etc., and Mark Zuckerberg, they wear the same clothes every day. They want to reduce the number of choices they're making. But having said that, look at the flip side. Everything we do, from the way we dress, the way we sort of carry ourselves, all of these are choices we're making. And if I facilitate that choice from a business point of view, for example, I do that, be like, hey, I chose Indigo, they did something cool for me in the cup, I like them, and I'll remember them, versus they give me a normal cup, I move on with my life, I probably don't even notice it. So you want to create moments in people's lives, and that's what we try and do as experienced designers, where we give someone a moment thinking, hey, we thought about you, we did this extra for you. That little bit of caring, a little bit of empathy that we sort of add to the act.
So you're saying that in the of 10 2.0, the number of memorable moments that you'll embed into everyone's day-to-day are going to be way more.
Absolutely.
Than what you had in the first avatar.
100%. Every single moment, I think really deeply about the second you walk in. For example, we're on the second floor, elevators that come up, and sometimes there's a wait at 5, 6 o'clock when people are leaving and the elevators are full. It takes a second for the elevator to come. I have a TV in my lobby playing old retro music videos. I don't need to put a TV in my lobby. I mean, it's outside where the elevators are. But I'm like, can I add some entertainment to your day while you wait for the elevator?
But how much experience becomes too much after a while? Aren't you just kind of tuning out after a while?
I think that's a challenge that we as designers have to keep sort of building, where can I add a little bit more, or can I pull back a little bit? Can I do something slightly differently? And that's what keeps it exciting, right?
Because I'll give you the counter to this, right? So when you go to a spa, that's an experience as well, right? But their definition of good experience is how to remove as much sensory input as possible, right? So very low lighting, very quiet, with maybe very soft music. People will be almost whispering. And so their definition of good experience design is, let's cut down sensory input, because sensory input will lead to more relaxation, and people will actually be able to shut down, even if it's for an hour, at least in our space. How do you respond to that in the context of a co-working space where people are already being bombarded with so much, from their phones to the laptops they're working on, and now you have a co-working space that's also trying to make everything memorable, from drinking a cup of coffee to waiting for the elevator to switching on the lights.
That's the thing. I mean, that's again, when we talk about balance, you're right, it'll be a bit much if you just talk about the experiences that are memorable. But there are also times, for example, in Often when you walk in, we have dedicated cabins that are your own sanctuary. Cuts off everything. It's designed very minimally. So when you're working, you can concentrate on the work, right? But once you want to go take a walk, once you're sort of out of the zone, so we basically design for moods and activities, right? You want to be like, okay, I'm working, I want a quiet space, I can give you that. You want to do a meeting, that's a serious board meeting, you can go to a serious board meeting in our, okay, not that serious, because nothing about often is that serious. But having said that, we're doing more where, and honestly, that's all you need, right? If you think about a co-working space in an office, you give me work, a quiet place to work, and you give me a quiet place to sort of meet people, that's all we need to do. But here I'm adding more. So I'm giving you the basics plus.
Got it. So you're saying it'll be what you need when you want.
Right.
To the amount of, sensory input that you want. As someone who's been like a connoisseur of experiences, right, both physical and digital, what would be your pick for the one exceptional experience that you've had with a brand, or whether it's physical or digital, or it's a product, or, what would your pick be? That's
interesting. I mean, there are lots of lenses to sort of look at this by.
I mean, whenever I've talked to you, you've always given me fantastic examples. But if you had to pick one,
that's hard. It's very hard to do. I can't pick one, but obviously Indigo we already spoke about. In a similar bent of mind, I would say Virgin Atlantic was fantastic. I actually read about this. It wasn't an experience I had, but I read about this in Richard Branson's. I think it was a book. Where in Virgin Atlantic, when you're flying first class, they would give you salt and pepper shakers that were shaped like windmills, and people would steal them.
Okay, I remember this.
Yeah, and so the marketing guy or the ops guys go up to Richard Branson. They're like, "Hey, listen, they're stealing these cute windmills. They're expensive. Should we remove them?" He said, "Don't remove them." On the bottom right, stolen from Virgin Atlantic. So what that happened is that made it a memorable marketing experience, because when you would steal it,
example.
And you'd sort of take it in your home and put it out there, and a guest would pick it up, and they would say like, "Hey,
that's a great example."
It would do marketing for them. It would be memorable.
So almost making it legit for people to steal it, but still calling it stolen.
Yeah,
that is an interesting kind of weird
that's great marketing
experience.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned airlines, one airline I wanted to pick your brains about is Ryanair.
I love them.
So Ryanair is unapologetically cheap. I guess the keyword is unapologetic. So let's say you and a friend of yours is traveling together on Ryanair, you'll get random seats. So you may not be sitting next to your friend. And so, one person was complaining about how he and his girlfriend were assigned, random seats, and they couldn't fly together, and how that's atrocious and very disappointing. Any other airlines would have been like, "Hey, we're really sorry about this. We'll make it up to you," and Ryanair cares about you. Ryanair's response was, "You don't get random seat allocation, I guess."
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Because they are really hated, but people still fly them, and they are so successful.
I think I love them. I mean, I think it's a great...
So their strategy is let people hate us?
Yeah. The best brands do that. They're themselves unapologetically. And Ryanair is the best example of that. You get what you pay for. Their point of view is simple. You want a $15 ticket, you can't have everything.
Right.
And I can...
So you're choosing us for being cheap, don't expect great service.
Yeah, treat them like every other airline. I give you a $15 ticket and I don't do random seat allocation, and also serve you a meal and etc. But $15 can only get you that far, right? The quality of the meal will be bad. The sort of staff they hire will be bad to do your sort of check-in process, etc. The plane will be small. Here, it actually helps them by being upfront.
So you're saying don't try to be someone you're not.
I mean, your expectations of the customer.
Just focus on your core USP.
Yeah.
Go big on that.
Yeah.
Forget about everything else. So are you saying the key really then in an experience economy to be successful is to be authentic? I mean, authentic to a point where people might hate you, but it is who you are.
I'd rather have people have an opinion about me than be indifferent to me. And that's key. In today's experience economy, like if, for example, a zipper, you don't care what brand zipper you have, so you will just buy any. You become a commodity. But the second you make like a pink zipper that zips interestingly, etc., then people come ask for you, or they don't ask for you, but you're at least memorable.
So you're saying there's no choice but to be the purple cow?
Absolutely.
Because that's where the world is. So outside of airlines, if you had to give me another example of an experience that has really stood out to you.
I can talk about Japan, and I think everything is so exceptionally designed there. But I'm trying to think of an example from India that would make me...
Why Japan?
Because I think Japanese live in a different... they're, I think, 100 years ahead of us. They are so deep in the way they think and they design I feel like you go there and you realize that only when you're there that you're like, I never thought this could happen.
But do you
this way.
think Japan is really embracing the whole experience economy transformation?
I think
They still seem very old economy.
it's a dichotomy. There's a certain type of person there who is completely old economy, etc. And then there's this new economy wave of young people, etc. that exists. But having said that, I think that is the future. I think the future is embracing living with old traditions, with technology enabling it. And that's what Japan is sort of headed towards as well.
So that dichotomy is interesting in Japan.
Yeah.
And if you had to pick an Indian example, you said, you said Indigo. Your example is also validated by the fact that they have the largest share of the Indian domestic aviation market. That's a great case study for focus on experience design and creating memorable moments in every small activity pays off. Mm-hmm. Any other example that comes to mind?
I mean, there are lots of these D2C brands doing a fantastic job with that, and especially the ones that are taking on big industries. For example, you may have differing opinions about their product, but the whole truth,
their protein bar.
Yes, the packaging that they do, the little note that they write, even their after sales, so they send the emails that they send, it almost seems that they truly care about your health.
So let's say the whole truth came up with a biscuit. Do you think they can take on Parle-G?
There are so many big brands that exist, like a Nirma washing powder, or a Parle-G, or a Jockey, etc., who are huge, vast, who don't care about experience. They give you a product and they move on. Yeah. But I think those days their days are numbered. There's going to be a new startup that's going to come in.
Somebody's going to disrupt Parle-G.
I think so.
Somebody's going to disrupt Amul butter.
And it's probably going to be another brand from within the portfolio of a Nestle or a HUL
a butter company that is experience focused, that writes killer copy,
right,
is going to come and make us change our Amul butter habit.
I think so, because it's happening already. The more you sort of...
I would love to agree with you.
Yeah.
Sounds really impossible sitting here right now.
But I think that's the future of people are going to seek out experiences in their everyday moments, in their everyday life. And that's where the experience economy is heading. And I think it's up to you, designers like you and me, to sort of make the experience so exceptional that even if you're an Amul butter person, you're like, hey, this butter spoke to me, let me try it once. And that one change from Amul butter is actually going to be like a big one for you then going forward, because you're going to keep buying things based on experience.
So what you're saying is, as a startup or as somebody who is looking to disrupt an industry, you need to think in terms of making every small action more memorable. Is that the one advice you would give to somebody who's looking to start
Absolutely.
a company today?
Absolutely. You don't have to have a killer differentiated product if your experience of consumption of that product is exceptional and differentiated. You can give me the same Parle-G in a packaging that speaks to me, and I will pick that more and more going forward. Your product doesn't need to be differentiated anymore. It just needs to be good, and then you focus on the soft side, the soft selling, the soft marketing, where you're talking to the customer, etc., and you will see the tide turn and people start buying your stuff. And that's what I truly believe in.
Where do you see your co-working space often in the next 5 years?
For me right now, it's day to day. You wake up in the morning and you do the best sort of job you can. Obviously, I have plans, etc., to expand and be everywhere. Scaling is important to me. Kind of experience I'm offering and the kind of need I'm fulfilling is needed everywhere. Across India, across, I would say, the world.
So we are sitting across from Delphi.
Right.
Which is, I think, an example of traditional corporate offices. And in a sense, that's your competitor.
I don't think about them as competition at all, to be honest. We're offering very different products.
So why should somebody not go to Delphi and go to you?
Because you're going to have a better time. You're going to be more productive, which is what some people look for. Your employees are going to be happier. They're going to stay with your company longer. They're going to meet interesting people. You're going to, as a founder, meet new people and have find synergies in your business. Your business is going to do better. Why would you put that all aside and be like, hey, I don't want any of that, and I'm going to sit in my office?
If you had to have a tagline, I don't know if you have one for often.
We do, yeah.
What is it?
Do what you love and do it often.
Wow. On that note, Umang, I'd like to wrap this up. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful, broad-ranging conversation. And I hope I can convince you to come for a part 2.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 months in, to oftens
Absolutely.
second of thought.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.